Hello everybody, I'm coming close to the end of my time up here in formerly sunny Scotland. Today's weather is slightly more traditional. However, we are driving a car which is anything but ordinary. Today I am driving a 1991 Toyota Sera. And for anyone out there who thinks that there is no hope in the young petrolhead these days, well, I can happily tell you that you are wrong. Because sat next to me in the passenger seat is this car's owner, 19-year-old Morgan, who it seems is now cursed to a life of classic car misery, mostly thanks to, as with many of us, Gran Turismo and also his family. He's also got a lovely little XR2, which is a bit of a project, but this is now his main car. And when I put the call out for cars to review while I was up in Scotland, I saw his email and I thought, that is an opportunity I cannot turn down. Now, the Sera in many ways is a bit of a lorry car. It's definitely the kind of thing that he'd be into, but it's just so bizarre and so very, very Japanese. Apparently, Toyota were shocked at the fact that they didn't even manage to sell 16,000 of these. But not really much of a surprise, is it? I mean, it's just a bit weird. It's not a K car, which in Japan probably didn't help. That means that it was going to be much more expensive, trickier to own than the smaller class of cars that they have over there. They also didn't really bother selling it anywhere other than Japan and possibly a couple of very close territories. They certainly didn't sell them officially in the United Kingdom. Fortunately, if you're unaware, because Japan is a right-hand drive nation, owning one of their cars here is not really much of a struggle. This car's still running on a kph speedo, but as long as you make sure that you don't speed, you're absolutely fine. And in this thing, doing that is kind of unlikely. For all of its space-age looks, the engineering of the Sera is actually relatively ordinary. Underneath this sort of Jetsons-like canopy, you have a Toyota Starlet or Paseo. There's a 1.5-litre four-cylinder engine up front producing some power, and a 4-speed automatic gearbox here in the middle. It is driving, of course, the front wheels. And powertrain-wise, there's really nothing remarkable about this car. The thing with the Sera is it's one of those few cars, in many ways a bit like the BMW Z1, where it's a concept car that I'm not sure the manufacturer ever really intended to make, but somehow it did manage to get into production. And I'm kind of glad it did, because the world is improved with things like this on the roads. Of course, the main thing about the Sera is this glass canopy. It's crazy, it's like driving a goldfish bowl. You can see pretty much everything, everywhere. And if you're used to modern cars with massive A-pillars and ridiculously obtrusive B-pillars and then boots that are half a mile away, it's quite surreal. It's also a very nice thing to be driving when you've got such stunning scenery as this to be looking at. Now, it's not the quickest thing, but as is the case with old-fashioned automatic gearboxes, getting off the line and moving around town is fairly easy. Today is not a performance car review, this is more of just a let's come and enjoy the ride type thing. Now, the interior of the car is unfortunately very ordinary when compared with the exterior. I recognise pretty much every part of this interior from various other Toyota products of the time. You've got bits that I recognise from Celicas, Camrys, the MR2. As with most JDM cars, you've got the indicators on the right, which I really like, and it's just a curious little thing. The rear view is dominated by the oddly huge markings for the rear demister. One of the things this car came with as standard, which is quite unusual for the time, is air conditioning. It doesn't work very well, but I think you can imagine why Toyota felt the need to fit it as standard. When it's warm, I can imagine it would get fairly uncomfortable in here. The car rides on relatively diminutive wheels. It's a fairly light thing, you can feel that. The steering is actually reasonably direct, but the chassis is not set up for response at all. Moving up this reasonable incline, the gearbox does the usual automatic thing. Can't really quite decide what gear it wants to be in, but honestly, I'm just not going to judge it for that. They did make a manual version of these, although I don't think they probably sold anywhere near as well as the auto. This car really is probably best at home in towns and places like that where the excellent visibility means you can manoeuvre around with ease. And indeed, that is by far this car's best feature. You can see out of it so easily. Now, allegedly, this car was the inspiration for Gordon Murray for the McLaren F1's butterfly doors. However, I haven't yet seen an interview where those very words were spoken by him, so I'm not going to claim that as gospel. If somebody knows one way or the other, I would like to hear from you in the comments section, but I suspect Mr. Murray rather knew what he was doing with the McLaren quite a few years before this came out. Indeed, this had a production run of about 6 years, from more or less about 1990 to about 96. There were 3 phases of car and not really much changed between them. The later one got a few different extras as standard, and the cars did have some interesting options you could choose from, including the Super Live surround sound system, which is basically just a fancier stereo. You can actually get that in the Celica as well, and I might even buy some door cards for my GT4 with the many different speaker grills in them, so you can have a fancy stereo. It's such a curious thing when manufacturers make something like this, and it really is quite close to that Z1 that I drove. It's so weird and random and futuristic in its looks, you think it's almost a bit of a disappointment that they chose to make the powertrain something so relatively ordinary. But I guess they wanted to try and play it safe and perhaps not alienate customers that were maybe sort of tempted by the looks into then just being tempted away by the fact that it drives weird or does something strange, or they put the gear lever on the roof or something nuts like that. Actually does turn in quite nicely, to be fair. Alright, I'm driving this road probably about 25 mile an hour slower than I was yesterday, but I also don't care. You may have noticed the fact that the windows at the side are broken up because they can't actually open all the way. The most you'll ever be able to open them is this amount because, well, the way the glass is shaped just prevents it from happening. And if you're into glazing, which is an industry that my father happens to be into, you'll have some appreciation of just what a bugger it would have been to have moulded these panels. They are pretty amazing pieces of engineering. They really are. I'm very impressed with it. And the car being pretty small, although not K-car sized, it's very easy to place on a tight, narrow little country road like this. It's quite amazing too how different this road feels now compared with yesterday, when the blistering sunshine was out. With such an inviting and beautiful place, and now it looks a little bit intimidating and grim. Perhaps the benefit of having a car like this with its relatively ordinary powertrain is the fact that you can of course service and maintain them relatively easily. There will be quite a few Sera specific bits, however if you go on eBay you'll find that there's plenty of them about and they aren't stupidly priced. Otherwise, servicing and maintaining it is going to cost you pretty much exactly the same as a 1.5 litre Starlet, funnily enough. Incidentally, if you happen to have a Glanzer and you'd like to see that on the channel, let me know, because I've been trying to hunt one of those for ages and got close to doing one a couple of times and then sadly missed out. But otherwise, the Sera is indeed a curio. Everything that's strange about it is what you can see, and everything that's ordinary about it is what you can't. But like I said at the start, the world is a better place for having this car, and it's definitely a better place for having people like its owner who are willing to take a punt on this as a young person and drive it around. I wasn't that brave when I was 19, but this is a cool car. Thank you everyone for watching. Hope you've enjoyed today's little look at a very odd car. Please like, comment below, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.